One of the things that we talk about in our taglines and our advertising all the time is only members of the National Association of Realtors are bound by a code of ethics. The problem is that can't just be a tagline. You have to know the code of ethics and believe in the code of ethics. Today we're talking on WVAR Briefing with Mark Mansour about the various aspects of the code of ethics. Hi Mark, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
We want to talk a little bit about ethics. You're kind of the ethics expert for the state, and when people have ethics questions, the magazine, classes, and so forth, you're sort of the go-to. You're the person that people rely on to talk about ethics. So that's what we want to spend today talking about is ethics and some of the more finite and specific ethics issues. So let's start with your teaching. When you're around the state teaching ethics classes, what are the issues that the students talk about? What are the issues that they question or concern them the most?
Well, it's interesting in that class when I teach that class, because they seem to come in with just everything that's ever happened to them, and it's on their mind, and they want to tell me about it. The classes now are in cycles. Every 4 years every realtor had to have ethics. And now it's every 2 years. So I'm seeing more of the same people, and their questions are very different now because I see them more frequently. And, I had this situation where this realtor did this to me, or the member of the public said I did that to them. So the more I teach and the more that they, I don't want to say understand, but are familiar with the code, it always sparks something in their mind that, oh, this happened to me. It's interesting that the most talking is during the breaks. We have breaks, and I have a line of people that want to come up. Just as the same with you when you teach.
They never want to talk about it in the class when they don't understand it.
No.
How helpful it would be to everybody if
they
could.
Right. So, it is very, we do 3.5 hours of continuing ed with the code of ethics, and I actually could probably be there 7 hours and 3.5 of just talking one-on-ones with them. A lot of people don't think about the code of ethics until you start talking about the code of ethics and what has happened. So it is an interesting, it's always, every place we go, every scenario is different, and it's interesting to hear what they ask me. They've asked me from articles 1 through 17, not knowing what articles they're asking. They just have scenarios, and I'm thinking, okay, this could be Article 9 with a little bit of Article 15, and so it is. I see a lot concern when we go to the boards and teach the classes.
Do you think that I think the exposure we get is orientation, and then unfortunately, it's just like the real estate law. Our members never look at it again unless they have a complaint filed against them, and then they're shocked about how could this be. When if it's my belief, and that's why we tell them all the time in the orientations that we do, know this stuff. And if you know it, then you're less likely to fall into the traps. Because I don't think that anybody sets out to intentionally say, you know what, today I'm going to violate the code of ethics. They just, and in many cases, just like we've had discussions with other folks about agency and things, it's just like oftentimes the violation occurs because they think that they're doing something in the best interest of their client, when in reality they're not.
And 90, I call it 95%, maybe 90 to 95% of all the violations of the code of ethics are done, and violations of license law is done unknowingly.
Absolutely.
They don't know. I'll tell on myself. I used to violate Article 11 all the time, not knowing. That you were supposed to do a certain thing with your client and disclose things. So I think it opens their eyes, and I think that's why when we go over it, they'll come up to me on break or after the class and ask questions, because I think they're asking a lot of the questions about, oh my gosh, I did this.
Right.
I'm glad, because no one in class is going to say, well, you're right, I did violate Article 9, Article 3. But they'll come up to me and ask me the question.
Well, you can tell them as long as it's been over 180 days, you can say it in the class.
Yeah. But most of the laws and ethics are violated unknowingly.
What is the, you just switched subject, well, not subject, but direction a little bit. You just got back from D.C., mid-year meetings,
Yes.
Realtor Party meetings. Any changes announced? Anything's going to be changed to the Code of Ethics?
Yeah, of course, we have to follow the Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual. That's
right.
The state committee group has that big blue book that has the guidelines, and there's always changes there. But when it comes to the Code of Ethics, there's a big change coming January 1, 2019, and that's going to be Standard of Practice 1.7. And basically, in a nutshell, the change is going to be the listing broker must confirm with the buyer's broker that the offer was presented to the seller. There's some details on how and who has to ask and how it has to be given back to the buyer's broker in writing. Those details will be worked out at the National Convention in November, but the actual Standard of Practice 1.7 is changing, that the listing broker now must inform the buyer's broker that the offer was presented to the seller.
We hear that at the office all the time. I mean, it's a huge problem. People are always questioning, I'm not sure my offer was presented. But is this change going to be anything that, and I don't want to suggest that a broker might do this, but if a broker wanted to, they just check it off themselves that it happened? I mean, how many times, you're a broker, I mean, how many times do you know that an offer has been presented? Confidently know, without a doubt it's been presented, rather than hoping that it's been presented by your agent? Or, I mean, is it still kind of a, yeah, they did it, and you hope they did?
And yeah, I mean, the broker can be, because of the way the new Standard of Practice is written, or the wording that's added in Standard of Practice 1.7, the listing broker is the sole responsibility to tell the buyer's broker. So can they say, yeah, the offer was presented, check it off, and let the buyer's broker know? I'm thinking that 99% of all brokers are going to make sure that offer was presented, and what they tell the buyer's broker is going to be that the offer was presented. We hope that.
Right.
But there's going to be no way that we could possibly find that out, the buyer's broker, by contacting the seller, because you can't cross that line.
But what I'm saying is, the listing broker, what you're going to do, I think, is say, hey, so-and-so, did you present this offer? And they're going to say yes, and then you're going to check off the box. Because a broker's not going to, particularly very busy brokers, aren't going to have time to call each and every seller and say, hey, was this offer presented? Was that one? So there's still, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I hope we can be trustworthy in the honor system, but it's still kind of an honor system. If I don't want to deal with it as a broker, then I can just say, yeah. So I think it's a step in the right direction. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Right.
I'm just saying there's still that opportunity for misconduct if you choose to do so.
And even if there's always, no matter how strict the Code of Ethics is out there and the laws, there's always going to be the opportunity to have that one situation where, it's done. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's going to be that. There's going to be that, and those brokers are not going to call the seller, but those brokers are going to have that realtor trained, their agents trained that, hey, this is this is the Code of Ethics. You must follow it. You've got to do it. So when you tell me that offer was presented, I'm taking it on your word, as an agent under me, that you're telling me the truth. So, but does that create an opportunity again for that? I don't want to call it a loophole, because it's not a loophole, but yeah, it does. It does, and especially and this Standard of Practice was created and amended because of the multiple offer situation across the country, the low inventory. Right. And we have markets here in West Virginia that has that low inventory and that multiple offer. So
surprisingly, right now, most of our markets, and this is the summertime, and this is when people are buying, so we have a lot of low inventory boards.
So this is to help with that question, because that was one big question that always came up. And I know you,
Right.
As the CEO of WVAR, you got that question a lot from our 2,800.
Oh, we hear it all the time. Oh, I'm sure they didn't present my.
So, times that by some of the you're hearing it as a CEO. Imagine the other CEOs across the states that are hearing it. So that's why that was put into place. We just are, again, we don't hope, but we think that
well, you've got to trust. I mean, you've got to trust your agents.
Yeah.
I wonder if, because I know that you like forms. You like forms a lot.
So yes.
I wonder if there's a culpability issue. In other words, if I relied on my agent to tell me that they presented the offer, and I subsequently find out they didn't, and I checked off this box that they did, well, certainly the agent is going to be in a lot of trouble, not just code of ethics, but with real estate law, and that's one of those offenses you can lose your license for. But as the broker, you're also culpable for that. So I wondered, because you like forms, I wonder if you see an evolution down the road of just another one of the forms that you have is the seller actually checking off each time. So you have that documentation. Well, I didn't just rely on my agent. The seller checked off that they received the offer. So that now, is there going to be an evolution of some form that goes with every offer for the listing broker's files? It doesn't necessarily have to go to the buyer's broker, but for the listing broker's files, in case it's questioned, look, the seller checked off, and they did have the offer presented.
I feel, which I know we have that on at our form, and I know some boards have it on their form. It basically is going to come, I would think that this language is going to be entered into maybe the purchase agreement. And it might be at the bottom. Seller has received.
Well, at the purchase agreement level, then they received the offer if they. Well, no, I guess they could reject it. No, that's right.
Right, they could reject it. And so you're going to, I think what you're going to see is the language added on the purchase agreement, because the purchase agreement is coming from the buyer's broker, and they're going to want it. So I feel the brokers, maybe boards, however that's, whatever the local board has, or the individual broker will add that language, probably on the purchase agreement, because they want to protect their buyer. Right. So they're going to say, seller has received offer and has accepted, rejected, or negotiated. And that's where the check mark will come.
I wonder if, because this whole, just to drift for a minute, this whole offer thing is always a point of contention. When you have the statute that says, shall be delivered promptly, but there's no definition of what promptly means, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, what that is. And we tend to get ourselves in trouble by the way we do these things, where, presenting an offer promptly doesn't mean, oh, wait, I have an offer, I got to call a bunch of people and see if I can generate more offers. Right. It means present it promptly. And on top of that, I always question, well, why are you doing that now? Why haven't you been doing that all along, making those phone calls? It's like, oh, I'm in panic mode now because I have an offer. And we've got to get our folks to understand that when you have the offer present, there's no merit to not present it. You're not doing your job. You're not doing the best service to your client, to the other person's client. And it doesn't make sense to me how people will delay and postpone the presentation of that offer, when if it can be proven that they did, that's another one of those things that you could lose your license over. Not just a slap on the wrist or a fine or a letter in your permanent record, but you can literally lose your license over not presenting offers promptly or at all. And yet people so often discount that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's there. They added this in Standard of Practice 1.7. Look at Standard of Practice 1.6. All Standard Practice 1.6 states, and maybe not verbatim, but all offers must be presented in a timely fashion, objectively and in a timely fashion. So when someone says, did you present my offer? Well, not yet. But Standard Practice 1.6 says it has to be presented in a timely fashion.
Well, and the statute says promptly.
And so does the license law. Now, people say, well, he didn't present my offer because it was verbally. You have to present a verbal offer. You should present a verbal offer, but Standard Practice 1.9 also states that all offers must be in writing. So, or Article 9. So basically, Standard of Practice 1.7, there's two Standard of Practice already in an article that states it has to be in writing and it has to be presented in a timely fashion. And also, so does the statute. Right. So, I think they've covered their bases. Again, it's what the Code of Ethics states that you have to follow. It's what the statute states you have to follow, but is it going to be followed?
Yeah, well, we all know the people that aren't following the rules just don't follow the rules,
No.
and we hope that's a significant minority out there that doesn't follow the rules. But it's in their best interest to follow the rules, and that's what people. There's no way. I guess that from my perspective, and I'm a layman, there's no way that you can serve the best interest of anybody's client by not presenting the offer promptly. Because typically, I mean, at least in my thought, tell me if I'm wrong, is when I'm not presenting an offer promptly, then it's because I'm trying to get a better offer.
Right.
And you could argue, well, that's better for your seller, but what if you don't get that other offer and you waited 3 days? Is it really better for your seller?
No.
And it's not your job anyway. It's your job to get it there and let the seller decide.
Right. And you have to follow the lawful instruction of your seller. And if you tell your seller, I have an offer, I want to present it. We have a show, just for example, we have a showing, in 3 hours. Mm-hmm. If the seller says, hold the offer until after the showing, see what it says, I mean, you have to follow what the seller
And that's
says.
not unlawful, because it technically made them aware of the offer, which covers it. But what is then, if you take that to the next step, it has to, like you said, the key is lawful instruction. And so if the seller says, I don't want to see any offers without earnest money, or I don't want to see any offers below a certain price, you have to present all offers. So that's not a lawful instruction of your seller, and you can't. Not only do you not have to, you can't obey that. You have to present every offer.
Yeah, remember,
and the way you present it is I don't believe it says this in the statute, but you hit on it. It says it in the code is objectively. So that means here's another offer. You're not going to like it, but that's not objective.
No, you cannot make arbitrary decisions for your seller, and that happens all the time unknowingly. So it has to be presented in a timely fashion and objectively. You're like you said, I can't come to Ray. Gosh, I've got an offer. You're not even want to see it.
Right.
That is not objectively. So you're right. It is the best interest of your client to present all offers. I mean, you have to, but to present it, why wouldn't you? I don't know.
Well, I think it boils down to and I saw this on an NAR video. They're talking about handicap housing in a fair housing video, and the gentleman is the buyer's in a wheelchair, and he says, or actually it's for a rental, but he's in a wheelchair, and he says, oh no, I want a bigger unit. I'll pay for the improvements to make it wheelchair accessible. And the realtor says, well, why would you want to do that? And that's where we fall into these traps, because it's not her job to question why he wants to do something. Her job is to understand that it's okay if he wants to do that and move forward. And so, again, it's one of those pitfalls where they're not doing it on purpose. They're just being, well, why would you want to do that? Well, it doesn't matter why. What matters is I want this, and it's your job to get it for me. And it's kind of that, the thing where I say that realtors forget sometimes that their job is to get the deal to the closing table, to be in charge of the process. It's never their job to be in charge of the decision.
Yeah.
And that's always the client's responsibility. But sometimes, well, why would you want to do that? Or why do you want to do this? And that's when they step over those bounds. They don't mean to. They're trying to help, but that's when they get in trouble.
And that realtor, that agent, that broker forgets that.
Right.
And it's easy to forget it because you think you're doing what's in the best interest of your client by asking this question, and it's not.
It kind of reminds me, it's a different topic, but the same sort of scenario. I'm on the board of a credit union, and we used to have a loan officer who was retired, and when a loan would, he like anybody, when you write loans, some of them go bad, and he said, I've never written a bad loan in my life. And he was right. He didn't at the time, but things happen and things change. And so I think even when they violate the law, and certainly the bad loan isn't violating the law, but they're saying, well, but I was doing what was best for my client. And they really genuinely think that.
Right.
And it's just not, because they don't think it through. Is it really? Is it in the best interest of your client to ever not give them an offer to let them decide? And of course the answer is no. It's never in the best interest not to let them have the full field. Because you've been in the business long enough to know that sometimes vibes, issues, feelings come into play where a seller may take an offer that's not the best in the agent's mind, but for whatever reason the seller wants to take it. And so that's why you can't ever make that decision for them.
I mean, our job is to present everything. Let them, like you said, they're the decision makers. We're not. And we unfortunately think we're making the best decisions for our client arbitrarily, and we're not.
Right.
So remember, they're the ones that we're here for them. So,
what do you think in terms of all 17? Actually, I say 17, really 16 articles because it's hard to violate 17. But what do you think is the most violated? What do you think that people violate more than anything else?
Article 1.
Article 1?
Yeah. And Article 1 is you have to have the best. There's two parts of Article 1. Is that you have to have the best interest for your client. Your client, you have your fiduciary duty to your client. And the other one is you have to treat all parties honestly. So you have to have the best interest in mind with your client, but you have to treat all parties honestly.
Right.
And it's all in Article 1, and then all the standard of practice that followed. Actually, Article 1 and Article 16 have the most standards of practice. But, you have that fiduciary duty to your client. You owe the utmost to your client, but you have to treat all parties honestly.
Right.
So if you feel it's the best interest of your client to do something, but you're not treating all parties honestly, that's where the violation happens. So Article 1 and probably Article 16, but I'd say Article 1 is the most violated, with Article 16 as the second most violated.
And I think that's fair, what we've seen in terms of all the complaints we get at the state office. But it's also, you've got to mention that Article 1 is also the most broad and vague. So it's also becomes a catch-all when you're going down the list. It's easy in most anything that you accuse someone of, it's easy to say that they misrepresented the facts and didn't paint a true picture. So I think that's part of the reason why. That's that when nothing else fits, Article 1
Article 1
does.
Is where it goes.
So final thoughts? Anything you want to finish up with?
To the realtors out there, let's look at the code. Read the code of ethics more than once every 2 years. More than don't let it sit there and get dusty. It's interesting. When I do my classes, and one of the first icebreakers, one of the first things I do is they have to look at least. Answer some questions. They have to look and open the code of ethics because there's 4 pages, and I always ask them. I say, okay, be honest. You're not going to get in trouble, but how many times, or is this the first time in how long? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years have you opened up that and actually read the code of ethics? And it's 90% hand raises because they don't look at it. So my final thoughts are, we can't know everything about everything. Oh my gosh, our brain would blow up. But when it comes to the code of ethics, let's look at it more than every 2 years. And that would be my final thoughts. And remember, don't get scared. We all violate the code of ethics. Remember, 90 to 95% of us violate the code of ethics unknowingly. So, final thoughts, take a look at it.
And maybe you can fix some of that unknowingly.
Right, exactly.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Remember, the Code of Ethics is what separates you from all the other licensees out there. Be proud of the Code of Ethics, stick to the Code of Ethics, and above all, pay attention and read the Code of Ethics. The first time you see it shouldn't be if someone files a complaint against you. Thanks for tuning in.